G'day everyone, Mike here, and welcome to another edition of Season 2 of the Beyond Billables podcast. On the show today, I got to welcome my friend James Dappershee. Now, a lot of you will know James from Coffee and a Case Note. He is a commercial corporate lawyer from New South Wales. He has an amazing following on social media because he's made super useful content, super valuable content with Coffee and a Case Note and everything else he does. And we go into that in detail. We talk about his strategy. We talk about how he's executed on it, his journey in the law, and what he's learnt along the way. James is a terrific guy and he has a great story to share. He wants to see real change in the profession as well. And we spoke about that, especially in the second half of the episode. I hope you enjoyed the show. Rap music, horror movies, slow drip coffee, equity disputes. James Dappershee, welcome to the Beyond Billables podcast.
These are a few of my favorite things. We just need some, well, in fact, there have been a lot of brown paper packages tied up with string in lockdown, haven't there? So
I hope someone's been sending them to you, mate.
If we manage to combine all those, we managed to get somewhere. Yeah, look, it's a rich and full life, Michael. And then, with lockdown, some of the richness and fullness gets translated into a different kind of richness and a different kind of fullness, as we were speaking about before. But I try to keep things varied, and 39 years in, it's going okay.
Well, mate, last time we spoke was in a lockdown in 2020. And that was talking more specifically about lockdown. But you know what? This is all about talking about you and your background. And I would love to go into some more depth on that. Obviously, one question I have to start with is, how do you manage being Australia's best known lawyer?
I don't, I realized recently. I did for a couple of years. Jahan Jahan, who I chatted with on a TikTok live the other day, I think has snatched the title. And I'm happy to say that, I was happy to claim number one spot for a while. Jahan, I'm expecting is going to be a future guest of yours, Michael, or if you're not acquainted, you'll get acquainted. And so for so long as I was, it was nice. But one of the things about being the champ is that you got to acknowledge when someone takes you down, and it happened in the last month or two. And so while I was there, I managed it reasonably well. Didn't get quite as much sleep as any of us as we should be getting, but that describes you and me and probably everyone listening as well. But look, it was good fun. It was a run I managed to use to experience the contemporary internet in a way that I wouldn't have. And so it meant I got exposed to weird things like what TikTok dances were particularly like going off at that stage, how Clubhouse worked, how you monitor a YouTube comment section. And I'm still doing all that stuff, but it's been an interesting journey, certainly.
So, mate, let's start from your legal journey, or even before that. So, what were you doing before law?
Yeah,
because you obviously were a musician as well and did other things. So you take us way back, way back.
The rough plotted history. Son of a mother and a father, and I've got a brother. They're still together, mum and dad's, and my brother's married and living in Hawaii at the moment, which is great. I went to a high school, one of those awful high schools that Tony Abbott's front bench is just full of old boys from my old high school. So I went to one of those. Out of high school, at university, I did arts and some economics, and I got some okay marks there and transferred into law. Later, I did what's called graduate law then, which I think is called a Juris Doctor now. But during that time at uni, I sort of branched out a little bit and started hosting radio. I started writing a lot of music reviews for a lot of different publications, and I started making rap music and going in rap battles. And going in rap battles is something that sounds really cool on paper. And I can assure you, particularly when they're Australian rap battles circa 2006, they are fairly at least uncool in practice. So it was a hobby I really enjoyed and look back on with great fondness. And so it meant that my journey, even through law school, was sort of informed by trying to think critically about the new music I was listening to, trying to engage with people who might be looking for a different experience when they're flicking through the radio dials, and trying to make music that made me excited, and also try to be publicly mean to people in a rhyming way, which is good fun as well. And so from there, going through law school, I never really thought I was going to be a lawyer. Like, funnily enough, my dad's a lawyer, his dad's a lawyer, and his dad was a lawyer.
Wow.
And so I was always like, I'm never gonna do that, man. I'm gonna be a cool, pop music journalist or something like that. And then as I progressed through uni, I was like, oh, how can I combine coolness with the law? And I was like, right, I'm going to be a media lawyer or defamation or IP or tech or something like that. Then I left law school and none of that really sort of came together. And as time passed, I continued to write music reviews. We had a few children, which always adds to the mental load, as we say. But through that all, I've sort of managed to hang on to some of those little hobbies. And the way that manifests itself most these days is that my former radio co-host, who's also a great friend from high school, and I now co-host a weekly horror film podcast where, because I'm petrified of horror films and I cannot imagine ever watching one because they're too scary, he will sit down opposite me and read the Wikipedia plot synopsis. And so his plan is to get me into horror films through very, very gentle immersion therapy, so that I won't have to see the really scary Freddy Krueger jumping out from someone's dream or whatever. I can just hear the anecdote. And so by way of plotted history, a bit of high school, bit of uni, bit of rap and music in there. And here we are, 13 years deep into a legal career, another 30 years to go, I reckon.
Oh, goodness. That's a long time to think about, mate. Coming out of uni, though, I mean, obviously you had these ideas of media, music, IP, but you ended up becoming a disputes lawyer, essentially. What was, how did that come about?
I think it's because of the sort of advice that I expect you would have given a number of times, Michael, because when you get to fourth year uni, you're going, oh, what am I interested in? What am I good at? Oh, no, what am I going to specialize in? And what a vast majority of successful lawyers, and when I say successful, what I mean is happy lawyers say, is that your specialty tends to come and find you. So I am quite literally a corporate lawyer. And if you told me at age 25 that the word corporate was going to be a very literal description of what I do, I would have been fairly disappointed, I'm sure. But what I found sort of drip, drip, drip over time was that by hook or by crook, the early work I did was disputes work. And I was okay at that. And I would have done any sort of disputes work aside from family or crim, because dealing with the consequences of a crim matter going wrong is serious, and dealing with the consequences of a family matter going wrong is serious. And I sort of am not the right person to take on that degree of care and anxiety for outcomes for my client.
Yeah.
And so over time, that sort of civil litigation approach just got narrowed. And then about 3 years ago, I thought quite carefully about, like, right, I seem to be okay at some of this. What's my favorite? And what would I like to be really good at? And what would I like to really focus on getting better at? And that was the corporate disputes I was having, the sort of shareholdery, directory disputes. And so from about 3.5 years ago, I just got more and more focused at making sure there were no decisions handed down that I hadn't read and understood. There were no clients coming in that I couldn't help in probably a more efficient and more effective way than the people who are out there in the marketplace competing with me, and trying to give myself the best chance to be the person who's well placed to run shareholdery, partnershipy, trustee, beneficiary type disputes in the marketplace. And spoiler alert, it's going okay. It hasn't failed yet, is I guess the position.
Well, mate, what was the catalyst for that, though? Because I find that interesting. Did you have mentors you were speaking to, or was it something that felt natural to you? Because there are these points of our career where we reflect back and then have to plan forward. And so I'm interested in because obviously it's quite a important reflection and inflection point.
Mm.
Yeah.
I think with the passage of time, it's got a bit blurred, and so I'm grateful for the chance to sort of reflect on it. Um, Even having left law school, I was always keen on being the person who gave the internal CLE. Like I'd get really pumped up and spend a lot of time on the paper and really want to sit down at the lunchtime internal lawyers meeting that no one else cared about except me, to be like, all right, team, this is how defamation works. And my poor colleagues, I would take up probably like 55 minutes of the full hour, hand them out a paper, direct them to different pages in the paper, and like send follow-up questions. It must have been deeply irritating and insufferable, but it's always appealed to me. And then through the years, I was lucky in that some external service providers like CCH had me talk to their accountants when I was only 3 or 4 years out. And then just sort of CLE providers would be happy to let me go and blather on at some event somewhere to give a bit of legal training. And that had always appealed to me, as had trying to contribute to the whatever law firm blog or law firm website I was employed at. And so I had a bit of a background as a junior of someone who didn't quite understand where marketing fit in the law firm, but sort of appreciated that other people thought it was important. And so as time passed, I arrived at this view, and I think I can focus down on the timing a bit more now to say, come 2018, I was elevated, promoted. A big matter I had settled. And so I had a tiny bit of time on my hands and a feeling that I was now more or less responsible for feeding myself, for bringing in my own work. And while that's sort of suboptimal to jump from doing work for other people to feeding yourself, it is pretty much the law firm progression. And there is that sink or swim moment where I tend to call it a special counsel moment. And I'm a special counsel as we speak. So we'll have to see how the special counsel test's going. But generally that shift from doing other people's work to trying to bring in my own was one I addressed by maintaining that publication of legal knowledge approach, but moving it to LinkedIn. And in 2018, observing that other people were doing videos and coming to the view of saying, look, I think I have the skill set, which is sort of this background in radio, background in MC battling, which requires you to not break your external mask while panicking in your head and try to organize your thoughts really, really quickly. And I thought I had enough basic legal knowledge and the ability to stare down the lens for 3.5 to 5 to 7 to 10 to 12 minutes without blinking, metaphorically speaking. Of course, there's blinking, but remaining in the train of thought for that amount of time and delivering a piece of legal content that I hoped was two things. Firstly, rigorous, so legally correct, really, working through the law in a technical way, and also what I call approachable. So hopefully people can understand, when you're dealing with things like whether a company in receivership allows derivative actions due to the inherent jurisdiction of the court or due to Section 236 of the Corporations Act. That's quite a fiddly question, but I considered I had a skill set that gave me a good crack at being able to discuss technical issues in an approachable way. So that was about 2018. Michael, interestingly, that was about when you and I met.
Yeah.
And at that stage, it was a bit of a fun hobby. So, sort of a work-related hobby, if I can put it that way. And I didn't quite understand how it fit into building a practice. I just knew that apparently, legal websites telling people about the outcome of cases was good. Apparently, doing stuff on video was good. And so if I was telling people about the outcome of cases on video and kept doing it, hopefully that'd be good. And as time passed, people said nice things. And I think more importantly, I just kept doing it relentlessly, week on 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 week. I also leveraged it pretty efficiently. So gradually expanded into YouTube, into podcasts, onto Instagram, onto Twitter, onto Facebook, with thanks to your invite, onto Clubhouse, onto TikTok, importantly. And we sort of come to today where that approach of trying to be technically, legally correct, mixed with interpersonally approachable on the internet, has come to be a pretty fundamental and important part of how I get clients, get punters through the door.
Yeah, mate, that's a great synopsis and background. I guess thinking about coffee and a case note, I also like the fact that a lot of time we learn from doing as well. So it makes a lot of sense. And I think a lot of people approach content sometimes just from a pure sales and marketing hat and pure sales hat. And I see it all the time. They divide up. This is the marketing bit over there for the law firm. And this is the, BD and relationship bit. And this is this bit. And where actually a lot of the content is the learning aspect. It's experimenting by making the content. Now, you might not even put it out, but even articulating it is learning for you. And you actually become a better lawyer by saying it and by making the case note. And that's one of the aspects of which people miss. And I think especially in professional services and especially in law, when from a personality perspective and a lot of things are, a lot of people like to see things in silos instead of being interconnected. And that learning aspect makes a hell of a lot of sense. You were that associate running around because you wanted to learn. That's what I would see anyway. And to learn, you needed to articulate it. And then you realize that articulating it could actually help other people as well and build trust through that.
I completely agree. And it sort of works in two ways that, these are all cases I would have read anyway, right? If I wasn't doing an online quote marketing project. But the fact I'm doing an online quote marketing project is that as I'm reading, I'm also doing the analytical process of thinking, right, I'm okay to read 600 paragraphs and take however long it takes to read 600 paragraphs of a fairly complex judgment. But if I'm going to communicate this in less than 6 minutes, what is the heart of this? What is the meat of this? If I'm going to read 111 paragraphs of valuation evidence, how do I describe that in a sentence? And that sort of almost like journaling. Like I don't keep a journal, but I've almost realized that these case notes that I sometimes type up are more or less me recording what I've taken from these cases. The more of these fact patterns I'm not only reading, but also processing and then communicating and then answering questions about because people have questions allows me to refine my approach to how legal decisions are handed down and frankly, how judges think. And so, those bits of advice you used to get in law school of like, oh, think like a judge, approach things like a judge, did not make sense to me for about 10 years until I had read the, the appropriate number of judgments, whatever it is, 100 or, 200 or 500 or whatever it is, and had gone through them in such a communication focused way so that each thing I read, I forced myself to understand and then forced myself to reflect on what's the easiest way to communicate what the judge is saying here. And the best way to get to think like a judge is to read the thoughts of judges, which are published, reams and reams of them published daily. And so that process of engaging with fact patterns and law that are going to be relevant to my current and future client base, and then processing the problems that other parties in the position of my clients have faced, and then processing the thought processes of judges who deal with those problems necessarily means that I'm just refining my expertise. And there was a time when I thought of myself in practice as like the scariest, baddest monster out, because you might beat me this year, but next year I will have learned 100 more things and look out. And now I think of myself as almost the opposite of, I will try to teach you and tell you everything that is in my head. And I'm going to be as approachable and open to going back and forth with you as possible, because the moment I close my mind to being wrong, the moment I close my mind to being wrong is the moment I stop learning stuff.
Yeah.
And so that shift also happened in about 2018 of not being like, yeah, I know it and I'm right, into like, hey, I think it's this because of this. And if I find out that I'm wrong on either point, great, I've learned something.
Yeah.
And so it's been not merely a siloed marketing piece, as you rightly raise as a problem, Michael. It's also been a fundamental professional development piece as well. And I'm deeply grateful for both. It's also fun, I should say, for anyone who's thinking about it.
Absolutely, mate. So I guess you started in 2018. When did the penny drop in terms of, this is interesting, I've got something here? Because then I remember early on you talking about your strategy. I think we were having a beer in Sydney or Melbourne, actually.
Melbourne. We're having a beer in Melbourne.
Yeah. And you were outlining the strategy. And I thought, wow, this guy has got it together. He's got a strategy. It's, so when did that penny drop, man?
Yeah. So I can actually put my finger on the time quite clearly. So about May 2018, I started doing written case notes on LinkedIn, and then LinkedIn only allowed you to publish 1,300 characters. So even 1,300 characters is quite short for a complex judgment. So even that process was good. Then it was September 2018 that I did my first coffee and a case note, and I had the privilege/problem of the first one blowing up. And the first one got about 11,000 views and 180 likes on the first day, which was early LinkedIn numbers, right? Early LinkedIn content publisher numbers. And I was like, oh no, how am I going to deal with all the new work coming in? And of course, zero work came in. And, the lesson there was you can ignore all the vanity metrics and you just go and get on with it. And by the time you and I spoke, which I reckon would have been May 2019, when I was in Melbourne for a conference and you made some time to chat with me, I was trying to align this weird project that people were excited about. Hey, yeah, doing case notes in a video, it's great, with the fact that it hadn't really brought in much substantial work, but I had a feeling that it would in future. And so the strategy that I think I would have run by you then, Michael, would have been to say something like, I want to bring in one big matter a year, and I want to bring in, hopefully, a lot more medium and small size matters. And the way I'll bring them in is that over time, people will have formed a relationship with me because they will have seen my face explain something to them or heard my voice explain something to them over time so much that we'll have a bit of a relationship. Then when they've got a problem that rings a bell, they'll feel much more comfortable calling me because they'll understand I have the expertise. And they'll also feel that we have a relationship because I will have taken the approach that there's those two prongs that I really like of being rigorous and of being approachable. And so my hope then was that's going to work. And my experience now, 3 years in, which just feels mad to say, it's almost 3 years to the day that I recorded the first video, is, yeah, it works. And in part it works for that reason you raised earlier, Mike, which is I've got the knowledge at my fingertips as well. So it's not merely being a nice guy who uploads some videos. It's being someone who the chairman of your firm can just drag into a teleconference with no notice and be like, look, we have someone who understands the law right here. James, here's the position. Can you comment right now? And my answer is, yes, I can, because I'm in command of the law in this area.
Yeah.
To the extent I'm not, here are the exposures that I can then just go look into. So it's that combination of humility and confidence you get from diving really deeply into your subject area, which is a longer answer than I intended to give to your question, Michael, but I'm grateful for it.
I remember the conversation, and I remember telling you as well, just it takes time.
Yep.
And actually, you went, and your consistency is, and the volume that you've been able to do is something I look up to. I think it's just absolutely brilliant, mate. And the, because consistency and time, so many people have said to me, I'll try this, I'll do 1 or 2 videos and we'll see how it works. And I think to myself, it's not magic beans that you just chuck there and then the tree grows and you climb it all the way up the beanstalk.
Yep.
It requires, constant work, but that's the opportunity. Yeah.
This leads back to the Jahan Kalantar point, right? Jahan, who I shouted out earlier. So I'm delighted and happy to take that praise, Michael, because, I put in 1.5 years, 2 years, like day to day, week to week engagement on this process and started seeing things happen. And, by the 3rd year, there's a degree of this is growing up, and my weekly-ish videos are now fortnightly-ish, down to about, I'll probably only get 20 out this year, which is not really the sort of weekly goal. And the reason Jahan is now, to me, wearing the crown of getting content out is that volume point you wisely raise. That now my volume, the way I made it, is to be like, hey, remember this old thing I recorded 2 years ago? There it is.
That's okay, mate. That's okay.
Yeah.
I would say, though, consistency is about actually consistency, not volume per se.
Yep.
Like we all aspire for volume, and that's quality and volume. And that's what, because you want to make the best of the opportunity in front of you, right? Like, but consistency is not necessarily volume. And I've seen that myself. Like I couldn't stay consistent putting out the volume of things that I did for 2.5, nearly 3 years. It was a similar kind of time for me. So this year took a step back. And what I think people find is then you find another rhythm which works for you. And you're a more senior lawyer now. And so you'll find another rhythm that works for you. And I guess to my point about the longevity, though, and I would have said it at the time, and I even understand it more now, is that, James, in 5 years' time, people will still be talking to you about coffee and a case note, whether you do another one or not. In 10 years' time, they will. And there's actually this value, this inherent long-term value in the brand stuff. And I'll tell you how it plays out with all of us, right? Like you would run into friends who remember you as the rap battle guy.
Yes. Okay. Yeah.
And they'll bring that up, even though you haven't done it for X amount of years. People ask, I'm the lawyer guy. I'm like, I haven't been a lawyer for like 16 years, and so brand actually, and that actually, it's valuable over a long period of time. And it can take that much time for things to roll. And I guess also in what you've seen, and a lot of people have gone through, because you have to learn yourself. And we talked about this off microphone, but the content, the branding, the social media, it's opening a door. It's giving yourself an invitation. It's building trust so that you can have a conversation. But it is not sales in and of itself in professional services. Business development, really good skills of business development, having a good sales process, having a good follow-up process, being, client experience, all of those steps. It's not just about doing something and sitting back and waiting for the work to come in. And because I think that's the misnomer, especially if you want to put, content and marketing in a silo over here, which is called lead generation, then you expect it on its own to generate the ROI, right?
This was the impatience I had when we spoke in 2019. And again, it's the sort of thing where you'll find your clients who are like 6 or 7 videos in, perhaps your good clients, and you'll be like, you'll say, great, love these videos. And they'll go like, Mike, each one takes me X hours to prepare for. And then I've got to go answer the comments. And then I don't actually get that many likes. And then when's the work come in? And your answer is, I don't know, but it's coming.
My answer is that even if only 20 people saw it, that's 20 coffees you didn't have to have. It's duplicating your time. And this is where the how everything is so interconnected, and an understanding of just how interconnected your content is with your business development and other things, because it allows you to reach more people. So you still have to do those things. You just don't have to do as many. Or when you do them, the person knows who you are. And so your conversion rates are a hell of a lot higher. Or at least you've got the opportunity. Like for me in life, just generally, it's about opportunities. I always saw getting good grades at school as giving me options. And then when I went to uni, I wanted to get the best grade. I didn't know if I wanted to become a top tier lawyer or a lawyer or anything, but I wanted the freaking option, man. And then in life, even now with the podcast or with content, it's, yes, I want work to come of it, but I just want those doors open. Yeah.
Yep. And there's no one who wouldn't answer, like in my experience, my call pretty much. I might have to add an extra step, but in law for like, I might have to reach out to someone to be like, hey, can you just tell Blogsy that like she or he will be having a chat with me because, I've decided we should have a chat.
Yeah.
And there's a degree where because you have served people, because you've shared so much and often taught them so much, they're delighted to, like, yeah, of course, man. Thanks for the chance to attempt to repay you that favor. If I can pick up on another point you wisely make about you will still have to go out and have coffees, but you can there is an opportunity cost. So to me, the model I've always got in my head is the golf day, right? Which must be like 6 hours. I've never been on one, never want to go on one. It must be like 8 to 10 to 12 hours, right, sacrificed. And if you go on 2 per year, that is like 1% of your billable year you are spending on the golf course with like 3 people who might not send you any work. And I completely get that golf days lead to work. That must be true, or people wouldn't do them. And smart people do them, and people who I'm in business with do them. So congratulations. But what I have in my head is that for me, I can spend 8 to 10 hours more effectively and leverage that 8 to 10 hours better than walking around a golf course with people I already like, who already like me, saying, well, isn't it nice that we all like each other? And so that's not to have a dig at golf days or have a dig at coffees, or like I myself used to do a lot of networking of going out for 2 or 3 beers after work and then shuffling off to, go home and have dinner with the family or whatever it might be. It's not to say anything is better or worse, but it's to bear in mind that each has an opportunity cost, and that I say using the internet in the way I do and the way you do, Michael, you can leverage your time so much more effectively, and you can turn the waiting for your coffee in the morning or your 4 months in lockdown running a homeschool, in my case, into time you can also leverage to build your legal practice, build your professional services business. And that's something a golf day can't do, which again is not to say golf days stink, but in my head, you just join the WhatsApp group to go, oh, can't wait till we have a golf day. And that's about the extent of what I'd be able to do if that were my strategy. Whereas options, as you rightly say, are available to you and available to me because we are making use of the contemporary internet as part of our strategy for building our professional services businesses.
Well, and look, if the golf day is part of your strategy, and somewhat it is for me, like events and in-person things are for me. I always say if I go to a room, an event full of people, I generally walk out with a new relationship, and I will generally get some work, right? But it makes so much more of a difference if the people know who you are before you go to the event. And actually, I don't like networking events, James. Last time I actually don't mind holding them myself because I get to serve people and I really love that. But going to a random networking event, I actually went to one on the Gold Coast earlier this year for my accountants. And after the presentation, I went to the bathroom and I texted my wife and said, I'm just going to hide in here because I didn't know anyone in the room.
And so you look at someone's name tag and you go, g'day, Michael, how's Beyond Billables going this year? Oh, having a pretty good year. Great. How's James Concreting going? Oh, pretty good. Well, great. Great to meet you.
That's tough. But as opposed to if you go into a room and you've got some kind of profile in the industry, it's actually makes life a lot easier. People actually come to you, or they're like, oh yeah, of course, I know your podcast. And it's a nice little icebreaker for everyone. So even if that is your strategy, you want to be doing the things that are going to give you the best opportunity within that environment. 100%. And that's where the opportunities exist. I guess, mate, what's been the biggest struggle though for you? Because it's not easy putting yourself out there.
Look, the same for, I was going to say the same. That's a little bit arrogant. It's a struggle that others with the same personality as me would have doing the same project, which is time. And there's a degree of snobbery for me about allocating time to real work versus allocating time to marketing.
Yeah.
And so in my head, it's been doing that dance of being like, oh, no, hang on. I wouldn't have this very exciting real work to do, which I'm excited to do, if I didn't make sure that I got at least a couple of TikToks up a week, or if I didn't make sure a month didn't go by without me summarizing a new case, or if I didn't come and sit down to chat with Michael. Like, if we just get a bit meta, the reason I'm really excited to talk to you now, like, Michael, we only set this interview up about a week ago, and you're like, hey man, I know you're busy. Should we talk in October, November? And we're recording this in early September. And that was a very classically empathetic thing for you to do, Michael, which is really consistent with your personality. And it was a nice test for me to be like, oh, got a couple of hearings coming up. Oh shit, billables weren't great in August. I want the team like marching on. I'm really great to put another 15, 20 grand on the numbers we got last month. Ugh. And of course, I wouldn't have I wouldn't have a practice of the kind I have now if I hadn't invested the time in attempting to build relationships. And so it was actually a really healthy microcosm for me to be like, no, if it's okay with you, Michael, you kindly made the time, to sit down and say, no, let's make sure I'm maintaining the relationships I've built and having conversations that interest me, where I get to sit down and reflect on the practices, Michael, you're employing in your business, the ones I'm applying in my business, and so that I can think in that sort of on the business versus in the business sort of frame of mind. And so that's the biggest challenge I've had, is that degree of snobbery about, and especially as I'm a litigator, and I don't know if it's the same for transactional lawyers who like to feel like business people anyway. As a litigator, there's a really bright line between I am drafting pleadings, I'm taking instructions, I'm writing a letter, versus like, going to read this case, going to do a LinkedIn post about this case, going to do a little TikTok about this case. There's a bright line, and balancing that is a challenge, I found.
Mate, it's not reserved for lawyers by any stretch of imagination. Anyone who's a practitioner of what they do likes to be doing the work to some extent. I get lucky because I get to practice while doing this so that I can learn the lessons to help my clients. So there's a really great overlap there for me. And I've always approached it as a practitioner. But I completely relate to that. Sometimes I'll go home and Sub will be like, what did you do today? And I'll rattle off all of these meetings and this and that, but I haven't felt like I've done anything because I haven't produced this, I don't know, outcome, this strategy.
Receivable, deliverable.
This, deliverable, right? And she's like, no, you did all of that. And so I think we all find ourselves questioning the value sometimes, mate. And
I had so many coffees. Oh, you wouldn't believe the nice comments I got on my TikTok about, Donda versus Certified Lover Boy. People were, it was great.
Yeah. So I guess on that though, like the positives and more specifically, I guess the platforms, where do you think you get the most impact?
I'll start with the positives, which is control. I get to control the narrative about me and my practice, what I'm good at, what I'm bad at, sort of people I go into business with, the sort of way I approach my business. And being able to control what is said about me and what I'm saying about me is a massive plus, because I can form my own strategy and execute it. And then when it comes to the platforms point, what I find interesting, and this is harking back to the kind invitation you made to me earlier this year, is that you'll have what we might speak of as pretenders is a bit harsh, but I think Clubhouse is on the fade. But you'll sort of have interesting pretenders, your Clubhouses, your Vines pop up that you'll go and check out. And for a time, they'll be diverting and interesting and engaging. But I think the platform that is there for the long haul is TikTok, even though the numbers are now, as you will have experienced, are not what they once were. And then LinkedIn, even though the numbers now are not what they once were. Both of those platforms have reached maturity, but I can't see it. And then podcasts, where again, as you will have experienced, the numbers now are not what they once were. And it's those three that I think are how I consume media. And it's those three that I think my sort of professional-ish client base consume media. And so it's those three that I'm most interested in. And the one I get work from most is TikTok, easily.
Really?
And what's interesting is it's pre-qualified work. So TikTok is, of course, designed for the time poor. TikTok, of course, yields huge dividends for the time poor. It allows you to spend 90 seconds on it and have watched 6 or 7 very interesting videos, and then you can go away and you can not check it again until tomorrow. And if one of mine happens to be in the 6 or 7, great. And if that happens for a year, then you and I all of a sudden have a fairly deep relationship.
Yeah.
Where I've been popping up on your phone, maybe saying something funny, maybe saying something interesting. And then again, if you don't like what I have to say and don't find it interesting, I won't be popping up on your phone. So I'm only there saying hello to people who already want to hear from me. And the huge benefit in that is that people come pre-qualified. And so people will be like, yeah, I remember that time when you said, your charge out rate is, $600 an hour or whatever it is. Yeah, I get it. I need you to go read all this stuff. Can you just tell me how many hours you reckon it'll be? And so you skip the sales pitch of sitting around saying, oh, look, I'm actually pretty good. And yes, I've got some experience in the area. And, we might use this member of the team or that member of the team, and I'll give you a cost estimate. People come in and say, look, could you please get to work as soon as possible? Because I'm in the middle of something you talked about the other week. And so TikTok as the first source of those pre-qualified matters, LinkedIn number 2. But what's more interesting is that and this proves you correct again, is that it's actually professional networks that have become open to me since I've started doing the online marketing that have been the most reliable source. And so it's the complementarity between online content publishing and in-person hand-to-hand combat, coffee sipping, catch up for a wine over Zoom type stuff.
Mate, that TikTok bit is amazing. Like, I knew TikTok was just incredible when I jumped on for the first time, and I then I signed up for someone's podcast just off my first time on TikTok. I know the kids had been on there, and I checked it out, but it was kind of like coming out of Musical.ly at that stage. And it hadn't started to age up, and then I got into it. And I found comedians, and then I just jumped into some podcasts. And then suddenly, within about a week, I'd listened to 10 shows of someone I'd seen on TikTok once. And I'm like, this works. This TikTok thing works. What I'm interested with you in TikTok is how do you ideate around the ideas? Because you do a lot of Q&A, which I really enjoy, and I'm actually keen to steal when I've got some time, because I love that as a concept, man. But how do you come up with the ideas?
If I can answer the last thing first, the Q&A is great because it requires no prep. And so I can publish a TikTok right now. Should we do something meta? Why don't we do something stupidly meta just while we're here? And this is a meta thing. It's meant to have me describing how easy it is to make content. So Gusick, this is Gus, a follower, has mentioned me in a comment, who's asked, did I hear about Fairfax and Voller today? So that's a defamation decision. So look, I'll just start recording this TikTok, Mike. I don't know if you want to wave back there. But yeah, look, I've quickly looked at the High Court and Voller, and I actually did a coffee and a case note on this 2018 decision about Bolton and Stoltenberg, or Stolten and Boltenberg, or something like that, which has a similar issue. Fairfax and Voller, it's going to be super important for those people who operate Facebook pages to bear in mind that they might bear some liability for the comments that are made in their Facebook pages. So, Michael, important for your clients, you're going to have to pay attention to it. And Gusick, appreciate the question as always, mate. And this is actually being recorded on Mike's podcast as we speak. So it's a nice meta moment as well. So that's good fun. And so I'll just tag you in this. I'll just go at Beyond Billables. And what we then have is me now being relaxed that I've done TikTok engagement for the day. So I don't know how long that took, but I think it probably took about a minute and 10 seconds.
Yeah.
And that's me trying to provide some engaging content for people who think I'm interesting. And that I can also just save and upload as an Instagram story. So anyone who likes me on Instagram will take the benefit of the work I've just done as well. And so to ask that, so to answer the first question, the last question first, Q&A gives you a chance to leverage that time. So we are in the middle of something, and you can well imagine that it's also quite engaging, Michael, as you're walking to your car. Hey, how does marketing differ today from 2010? Yeah, it's funny. I remember back in 2010, we used to be all about the and these days you got to make sure you get your bup, you get your dup, you get your dup. All right, cheers, chat soon.
Yeah.
And that's the full extent of it. So the Q&A I hugely endorse. And then the other two types of content I've got on TikTok are, I just find beat makers, duet with them and do little raps, which are fun. And, no one likes them except me, but it brings me great pleasure. But then the most popular ones I do are actually trying to do a case note in 1 minute, 1 minute 10. And I go through and meticulously do the subtitles as well. So I try to have a feed on TikTok that has lots of Q&A, couple of raps, and from time to time, a really rigorous case note that you can sort of follow through. And I give the citations. So hopefully we're eating our vegetables, we're learning some stuff. We're having a bit of sugar as well with the other fun stuff too.
Mate, so what's the feedback on the raps? Because everyone sits back and they worry about being themselves, and what that means, and showing some of their own personality. And, it's enough that a lot of us are quite perfectionist. And the truth is, for me, I haven't done much of that because I like to show up in a certain way. But I pay attention to your Q&As, and I've noticed it over the last couple of months, just because it's a consistency and volume thing. So I guess it's a long-winded way to say, how do you overcome the perfectionism versus publication?
I'm very lucky in that I've just born 80-20, maybe 81-19. I've got reasonable attention to detail for an 80-20 sort of person, but I hate stuff being in my to-do list for too long. And if it's in my to-do list for too long, I'll just be like, just get it done. And luckily I've engaged in hobbies over time that have supported that. So if you think about radio, you just got to do it. You're talking right now. It's like, it's not a podcast you go back and edit. You're on air. So just go.
Yeah.
And then similarly to freestyle battling, it's not sitting down and writing songs. It's saying, get up, start now, and go. And then in 45 seconds, you'll have stopped. And whatever happened between 0 seconds and 45 seconds is what happened. And that's that. And so I try to embrace that approach with content, because I don't make room in my head for the 2 draft videos that I don't know if they're any good. And 2 minutes in, I got a bit distracted and I'm not sure if it's technically right what I said at minute 3 there. I just refuse to make space for that. And that means that there will be stuff that falls into the 19. And I have the confidence, be it well-founded or otherwise, to, if I'm challenged, resist or back down, depending on what I'm challenged on. Someone might say, you've misinterpreted this case. I go, maybe I have, maybe I haven't. Let's see. And I'm old enough and ugly enough now to be like, yep, that's right. I got it wrong. Or to be like, all right then, champ. Let's agree to disagree. And then if we go to the raps was a challenge from your mate and I'm friend of your pod, Finn Bowd. It was Finn who said, look, you've done music before. It'd be fun for you to do a little bit more of this stuff on socials. And I think it's like, white middle-class Australian men doing rap music is corny and a bit dumb, right? It's fairly dumb and old, which is what I am. It's fairly dumb. And so there's an implicit degree of self-deprecation in doing it. Like, there's a bit of a wink of like, look, I know this is a bit dumb, but also I think I'm pretty good. And I'm like, I am pretty good. Like, I'm happy with that, full stop. I did not plan my rap career particularly well, but I'm comfortable saying I balance the self-deprecation of being like, I'm an old man doing stupid old man stuff with, but actually I'm pretty good at it. And it's somehow meeting that in the middle with whatever, trolling or meanness people want to send, I'm deeply comfortable. Because I think you and I have discussed, I'm pretty comfortable going in or making a bit of content with someone who wants it with me. I'm pretty relaxed about that. So I'm not at that age or stage of life where someone saying a mean thing is going to particularly get under my skin. And so balancing that 80-20 approach with the kind, request from Finn saying people would like to see it, and then kind compliments from people asking about it once you start doing it, has just been me attempting to share as much of myself as I can. And that's sort of what I do, and I don't want to get into too much of what we were speaking about off air, but I actually have like TikTok followers as well who are really committed to the degree of my self-care and the extent to which I'm missing it. So people will be like, man, I don't want to see TikToks from you at this time of night. Like you look like trash. Go get some sleep. Love you, XOXO.
Yeah.
And and there's a degree where if you're open to people and being honest with the stuff that excites you and interests you, you are then often paid back in the kindness and warmth that people will return to you because you're just showing up as yourself.
Yeah. It's interesting showing up as yourself because obviously, mate, you show up to talk about progressive things and other things as well, which can be relatively controversial at the time.
You don't have to say it, Michael. We need to smash the patriarchy. Equitable briefing needs to actually be taken seriously. The patriarchy is here to ruin the legal profession. It is your job and mine to smash it. You don't have to sit there and agree, Michael. I know you've got business clients who are listening, and that's fine. We need to smash the patriarchy.
Well, mate, what I find interesting about that and your always, strength of conviction is being able to balance, because I know how legitimate you are and how you feel about it, right? And I guess it becomes very natural to you because you are who you are, and so it's part of you to share on these things. How do you encourage other people to share and be part of those conversations, who might feel less likely to put their hand up, more held back by fears around perceptions? How do we get people to actually engage in those conversations so it's just not me and you patting each other on the back about those things? Do you know what I mean, mate?
There's this great Clementine Ford joke where she's like, why did the male feminist walk into a bar? And the answer is because it was set so low, which I think is, a classic line for you and I to be like, yeah, we get it. For anyone who's having problems with that sort of stuff, I might just sort of share my own problems and difficulties that I've only just started to overcome. Michael, you and I have been involved in X number of conversations, somewhere between 1 and 1,000, where someone who has power over our career is going to say something. And look, the experience for me is almost always about the appearance or sort of sexual desirability of a younger female colleague, younger female employee. And, 5 years ago, my response would have been to just sort of quietly go, okay, man, take a sip of beer and change the subject and just store that away and be like, Blogsy's a bit of a bad bloke. And there's a degree of cowardice in that, but I think there's a degree where that's how privileged men can understand what the patriarchy is. It is those conversations. And then you can understand a little bit about what being an ally is, where walking away from those conversations is one thing. Not agreeing with people, doing that is one very small thing you can do. But appreciating that it means something to say, listen, champ, you're welcome to your thoughts on whatever the topic might be, but that's not the sort of conversation I'll be engaging in. And I don't think it's the sort of conversation you should be engaging in. And I'd encourage you to just have a think about, what sort of chats you want to be having.
Yeah.
And that's easy for me to say because I'm a fairly senior person, and I've got a bit of a reputation for being out there on these things. And it's not easy if you're a, grad, or if you're 4 weeks into your new job and, there are these uncomfortable comments being made.
Yeah.
But I think what I would encourage anyone in that very awkward situation to do is to reflect on how completely awful it is for our female identifying colleagues and our non-binary colleagues to be attempting to do their best to work in a rough profession where that sort of talk is acceptable.
Yeah.
And, yes, you might feel awkward, and yes, you might worry. I get it. Believe me, I get it. And I've had my moments of cowardice in those situations before, and I will probably have moments of cowardice in those situations again. But I'd encourage you and me in that scenario to do our best to say, no, listen, champ, that's not how it's done. And you're going to need to reconsider that if you want me to think of you as someone worth doing business with in future.
Yeah. Oh, look, mate, it's so important. And I think and we were talking about mental health before coming on. And I think it goes to the importance it is that there are people willing to speak out from a place of
privilege.
Well, from a place of privilege, but it is privilege, but it is sharing, and it is difficult because you don't want to be seen as, leveraging that story but then it's also really important that those stories get told. And so someone's got to tell those stories, and sometimes that just has to be you, especially if you've got a passion for that. And so I think sometimes people worry about, whether it's just signaling or whether it's trying to leverage. And all I would say to that is, if you're true to yourself and if you have a real passion for sharing, then you need to. It's kind of like in martial arts. Part of being a black belt is training other people to become a black belt.
But also part of being a black belt is wearing the belt.
Well,
it's not all fighting on the mat. Like, you have to go around and hold yourself out of that. So you're signaling, like, this whole, again, Michael, this is probably not the place to get into it, but the idea that it's bad to say, don't be a misogynist, you fuckwit. Like, I just don't even understand. Like, I want to be perceived as someone who says that. That is a virtue that I'm very happy to signal. Yeah. If you think I'm signaling that virtue, great.
Yeah.
I'm not merely doing that, but yes, I am signaling that. And I think it is a virtue worth signaling.
Yeah. But I know myself that I sometimes won't say things because I'm worried about the perception.
Yep.
Right. Not about the perception of me, but a perception of me leveraging it. If I share something that's difficult, or if I share something like that.
Well, International Women's Day, shout out to Julie, best receptionist in the game. That, like, that sort of empty.
Yeah. Where my point is, I 100% believe that if the more we could share, like, from whatever those topics are, the more insight we get as well. Like, mate, I learned so much by you sharing those topics, honestly, like, because it's and this is what always goes through my head when I want to talk about something that might be uncomfortable for someone else to hear. I just remind myself that I only went and saw a psychologist because I heard someone on a stage of a business event about adult ADHD. So it was important for me to hear that story. And it's important for me to hear you talking about the patriarchy and to hear you talking about privilege and to question those things in my head. And so I guess and the other point with social media is that, the interaction, and it's like 10 to 15% of the audience. There's all these other people who really value what you have to say. I'm sorry, but that's advice you've given before that is so true. Sorry, Michael. I shouldn't have interrupted. Completely agree. Mate, no. Yeah. So I guess, the encouragement that I and you would have for people out there to please speak truth, to these things.
Truth to power in a literal sense. Yeah.
And don't think that, that you need to be worried about perception or other things. Obviously, when you're an employed lawyer, you do need to manage things. And I've got a lot of discussion about the benefits of being your own boss, because I can say
I'm sure you do.
but you know, I think all power to you, mate, and people like Finn, exactly. Like, man, she is just so the best. I've got like,
Finn actually is the best. Yes,
I just admire her and what she does just so bloody much. And I think a lot of people see that, and I think you give people a lot of you give people permission then to be the next wave to step up and say, I support you, James. Like, this is something that, we need to do something about. Maybe I don't know how to bloody do it, but you don't have to lead from the front. You can get in behind and be that support as well, even the vocal support. And
that means a lot to me, Michael. Thank you.
No, man, like it takes a lot of guts to get up there. And because I know how much it, I've struggled with it. And I always thought, especially with the podcast, it's an opportunity to talk about stories and to give people this opportunity. And for me, the tangible, actual, the best podcast I did actually, in the last few years, it was 100% a podcast I did with someone, and it had some of the lesser numbers of listens, and that disappointed me. But it was a survivor story from a situation where he was a survivor from institutionalized abuse, and we spoke about that. Now, it's just so bloody important to tell those stories, and for me, learning about that and having the opportunity to tell those stories and was like, oh, this is what I'm here to do, to be able to give people that platform. And whether it's Finn and we talk about all of these things, and I guess that's the position that, if you're out there, and we've talked some pretty big meta topics in the last 15 minutes, but what advice would you have for young lawyer, older lawyer, law firm saying, okay, I get it. We've got to do something. It's not a box ticking exercise like marketing, buy umbrellas, get stress balls.
Yep.
What do they need to start doing?
I don't know the answer to that in a macro sense. So, for example, when you say the firm, I've got no particular good answer. I think in the real micro sense, there are real opportunities. So if you are, for example, a litigation solicitor who briefs a lot of barristers and you only brief blokes, the reason you only brief blokes may not be because you are a misogynist. It might be because you want the best outcome for your client. And you've worked well with Mr. Bloggs, Mr. Smith, and Mr. McGee in the past. This is a classic Mr. McGee matter, and Mr. McGee is going to smash it out of the park. Now, your job, your duty to your client is to use the barrister who you think is going to do the best job. And so the problem here is not that you chose Mr. McGee. The problem is that you do not know who Kelly Jones, who may not wish to be identified with any gender, is. You may not know who Ms. Smith is. You may not know who Ms. Thompson is. And so it might sound a little bit trite or a little bit silly, but you might just you might ask a clerk on the floor of the barristers' chambers you like, look, sorry to be blunt, are there any young female barristers coming through who I should have a coffee with so I can understand their practice? I'm building, I just have 6 CVs of young female juniors who are between 2 to 8 years and their areas of practice who I can't wait to send a brief to when the right thing comes in. And so I'm not sitting here saying if you only brief blokes or you only instruct male, building experts or medical experts or whatever, that you should be cancelled and you're a problem and an effigy of you should be burned. We can save that for stage 2 of the revolution. But I'm saying that there needs to be a proactive step. And that micro step, I say, is frankly networking. It's being open to having some of the space you've made for white men who look a lot like the people you went to high school with freed up for people of other genders, regardless of what those genders might be, or people who might not wish to identify with any gender, to understand their story, and frankly, for your client's benefit, to understand their expertise. The best forensic accountant might be the one you've never met, and it might be one of a gender you were not expecting. And you will never know that, and your client will never get the benefit of that if you don't find out. And then even if Johnny White bloke, son of a convict, who married the daughter of a convict, you know, completely colonial background, and, you know, privileged as they come, might be the best forensic accountant or barrister or whatever all, but you don't know that until you've come to understood the shape of the whole marketplace, rather than just what the shape of the rich white man marketplace. So you're speaking from a position of ignorance, and that does not assist your client. And so you need to go out there and build your network and learn. And it's a challenge I'm in the process of accepting at the moment. And it's one that I'd encourage anyone else to go and try to accept as well.
Yeah. And well, it's a good challenge for me to give more people a platform too, mate. No, in all seriousness, that's
Yeah. Go check out my YouTube page, Coffee to Case Note.
But like, we need to, I love action. I want to be part of the solution by taking action and being able to empower the action, So if I can help give people a platform to be known, then all the better. And I think and that's a huge responsibility. But look, I think please keep sharing, because you're informing this privileged white middle class guy from Queensland. In all serious, man, like that's what I think that does. Sometimes you read things and you're like, oh, what? And then you rethink, and then you challenge, and then you make the realization. You just have to be a big enough adult to not like take that first reaction, because obviously we all see different things and we all hear different things, and we take it within the prism of our own experience. But actually having the chance to reflect on it, that's why, like, over the course of the last 18 months, seeing how people have shared and the difficulty to share their own personal stories. It's actually so much more, it's so hard for the personal story, so much more important than for others who can stand up first as well, to be
so true.
Doing so. So mate, the future.
Yeah.
Where to for Coffee and a Case Note, where to for James, and I guess what excites you about the next couple of years?
I've got really blunt, selfish goals of I want to become a director of the firm that I'm currently an employee of, promptly-ish. So I don't know when this is going to air, Michael, but we can have a race against time. That's a little unrealistic and silly, but I've got a fairly straightforward professional goal of hoping that's in the directly foreseeable future. That's a goal. Broadly, Coffee and a Case Note. I'm afraid the goal's really boring and basic. Just to keep going. Like it's been very much an experience. I would not have expected it to be the sort of experience where, LinkedIn status updates I have about smashing the patriarchy are fairly successful. Like it's sort of not what I thought summarizing bits of corporate litigation was going to go. And I didn't necessarily think it was going to, those two things were going to marry up particularly much. And so basically it's just continuing to move forward. Like I'm extremely bad at setting goals. So keep going is basically it. Before we spoke about that mental health checklist, and the sort of goal checklist. And for me, family 1, mental and physical health 2, professional progress 3. And just during lockdown, I've let 2, the mental and physical well-being, slip a little bit. So I just need to get back and engaged on that. But just taking steps forward in the right direction, whatever Elsa or Anna would say about doing the next right thing, I'll endeavor to do that.
Mate, so what does that generally look like for you as a parent, as a husband, as a busy lawyer? How do you find that self-care?
I don't have a good answer. I've got some exercise equipment in the garage that's got just a bit more dust on it than I would like. So that's step one. Michael, you're a better training person than I am, but I'm reasonably experienced using barbells, although you would not know it to look at me, and I'm not extremely weak, although you wouldn't know it to look at me. And so to continue on that path, to add a cardiovascular and a stretching element to that, which when children arrive seems to be like the cardio and the stretching are the two things that go. And so to stay on top of that, and then to try to make sure I'm just mindful about mental health. Drinking is one I want to stay on top of, 3 or 4 alcohol-free days a week. And I'm obsessed with this alcohol-free beer called Heaps Normal. Right. That I'm really all about. And so for the moment, that's been a recent mental health win to be like, oh yeah, let's crack open a Heaps Normal to celebrate a good week. But basically it's just one foot in front of the other and trying to be as mindful as I can about it. I get fantastic support from my coach, Stuart, and I know this is not me trying to be an influencer for Stuart, and he will know how much support he gives me, and that's very much the professional guidance, whereas mental health stuff I just try to stay on top of too, and the goals just seem to arise and be quite short term for me. And so I don't know, when we speak again in a year's time, I'll be like, can't wait to become associate professor at some university I've never heard of, in the corporate law faculty or something. I'll make up another goal and we'll see how we progress towards that in due course, no doubt.
Well, mate, we could talk forever, but I understand that you.
Yeah. Look, now that we've got started, Mike, let's really get into it. And let's really, we've got the first hour out of the way and we can really crack on.
What's the topic?
I really appreciate
What's the topic, mate?
Yeah. Board games. Do you still play them? Top 5 of all time. Top 5 recently released. Let's go.
Not happening. Sorry. I'm more of a Fortnite with my son kind of bloke, mate. And my daughter who kicks my ass. So.
Oh, nice. I'll have to follow that path with you.
But look, thanks very much for being on the show again, mate. You have inspired me. You gave me a kick up the backside about doing video and challenged me the first time we met, which I actually loved. And I just love what you're doing, what you're putting out, and I certainly pay attention. I'll learn a hell of a lot from it. I've got so much time for your ability to, speak truth to power and do it consistently, because I know how much work it takes. So congratulations on that. And we'll speak. Hopefully I'll have a beer in the new year with you, mate, when I open the borders.
We'll have to go to Heaps Normal together. An alcohol-free one will be great.
That'll be great. Thanks.
Michael, a pleasure and a privilege as always. Really, really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks so much for listening to the Beyond Billables podcast. If you didn't know, we're actually a brand and marketing agency that helps law firms, legal tech startups, and legal services businesses around the world. Our focus is helping our clients build valuable long-term brands, and we do that through brand strategy, through branding and design, website builds, social media, and content projects. No matter where you are in the world, we've worked with firms for over 15 years in multiple jurisdictions, and we're always happy to chat. If you want to chat about a project, drop me an email at michael@beyondbillables.com or connect on social media. Thanks so much for listening to the show.